COVID-19 impacted the world. In December of 2019, news reports out of Wuhan, the capital of central China's Hubei province, detailed the emergence of an atypical pneumonia-like illness that did not respond well to standard treatments. By January 2020, World Health officials had identified the 2019 novel coronavirus. By February 2020, the World Health Organization had declared the 2019 novel coronavirus outbreak a public health emergency of international concern, and by March 2020, the WHO declared COVID-19 a global pandemic. By April 2020, more than 1 million cases of COVID-19 had been confirmed worldwide. Fast forward to 2023, and as of late October, there have been over 770 million confirmed cases of COVID-19, almost 10% of the global population. But it could have been much, much worse. During the earliest days of the pandemic, hospital systems were flooded with patients, and they simply didn't have the capacity to handle the burden of a global population fighting a mysterious new respiratory illness. Supplies were dwindling, and they simply could not get enough of the critical devices they needed to treat their patients. While the world was on lockdown, scooping up all the webcams and laptop computers it could find, medical device manufacturers were scrambling to keep people alive. How did Microchip technology help hospitals fight the COVID-19 pandemic? Let's go beyond the microchip and hear a story of empowering innovation to enhance the human experience. Our guest today is Justin Wilson. Justin is a technical marketing engineer at Microchip Technology, working out of the Medical Products Group. He joins us today from our global headquarters in Chandler. Welcome, Justin. Thanks for joining us on Beyond the Microchip.
Hi, Dana. Thanks for having me.
So in the intro, we briefly talked about kind of a timeline of how quickly COVID-19 spread across the world and the immediate impact it had on the medical device supply chain, among other things. Microchip was quick to jump on the problem by coordinating inventory for existing devices and helping medical device manufacturers adapt to their designs for new devices. You've got a breakdown for us. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, COVID-19 shocked healthcare systems across the globe. In the U.S., less than a month after COVID was declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization, various regions began to run low on ventilators and other critical care equipment, and projections of the disease's spread showed that many more would be needed as soon as possible. So in response to this, our federal government placed an order for almost 200,000 ventilators. They spread that across multiple device manufacturers, and they wanted it done by the end of 2020. So this kickstarted the race to manufacture these devices fast enough to try to keep up with the rise of serious COVID cases. The issue then became trying to successfully manufacture these devices on a scale that had never really been seen before amid one of the most difficult supply chain environments of the 21st century. And here at Microchip, we've been providing support to our medical customers across many different end applications for decades, including the devices that were essential to battling COVID. So we knew that we had the capabilities to help. Our executive leaders took an early initiative to encourage collaborations between different groups within the organization, which focused on finding solutions to supplying our medical customers. So with that, Microchip began continuous communication between over 300 employees from global teams throughout the company, which included sales, client engagement, field support teams, engineering teams. And with these actions, we were able to work together with the engineering and procurement teams from the medical device companies to determine what products they needed and how we could utilize our resources to get them those parts as quickly as possible.
So this was quite a mobilization. It was calling all hands on deck kind of situation. How long do you think that took? Did that take days, weeks?
So from when COVID was declared a pandemic,
right.
The federal response was pretty quick after that, and just a few weeks after, the Senate passed the CARES Act, which is the Coronavirus Relief and Economic Security Act. And just about a week after that is when the federal government placed an order for the 200,000 ventilators. So to put that into perspective, the total number of ventilators before the pandemic in the U.S. was estimated to be around 160,000. So that order of 200,000 would effectively more than double the current inventory, and they wanted it to be done in 8 months or less.
Because they didn't know how bad it was.
Exactly. So they just wanted to stockpile, go overboard if necessary. So at that point, like our point of view of the problem was very clearly defined. The world needed more of these critical care devices, and the devices needed semiconductor components. So our response following that announcement was pretty quick. On April 2nd is when that order was placed for the ventilators, and by April 4th is when we created that cross-company team to start addressing this.
That's pretty fast.
Yeah, and so we started this by prioritizing shipments to our current medical device customers, because with that order, they started to ramp up their supplies. And if the products our medical customers were available, it would be expedited to them to try to keep manufacturing going, especially as they were ramping up. And if we didn't have the parts available, we would take whatever steps we could to speed up production and reduce lead times to minimize the delays. When the lead times were too long and we couldn't source the exact product, we would search for an equivalent part to recommend and work with the design teams to try to implement the change without risking any performance or patient safety. And these changes ended up usually only requiring some edits to software, and they allowed the medical device production to continue with limited downtime.
So that's a big deal. The hardware remained the same, and we just did some tweaks on the software side to kind of replace components that weren't available?
Yeah, exactly. So Microchip is pretty well positioned for this kind of response because we have such a wide variety of products, and a lot of them have similar but slightly different functions. And so with tweaks in the software, they can a lot of the times achieve the same goal.
Over 100,000 SKUs, I imagine we have options.
Yeah, exactly. And so another action we took just involved launching an extensive kind of industry-wide awareness campaign. And to do this, we looked at our inventory. We identified appropriate products that could address the shortage of parts for these medical devices. And we communicated this to the medical device manufacturers to let them know that we could be their go-to source for some of these parts. And this approach really did seem to accelerate the process for these companies seeking replacements for scarce components. Like, not only did we expedite the supply chain, but we also were able to make some connections and provide parts to customers we never really thought to target immediately. Mm-hmm. And an example of this is one European government agency that had taken an initiative to produce more ventilators. And what they did was they repurposed a military equipment factory and they changed it into a ventilator production facility. So they had the infrastructure at that point, but they still needed to source the semiconductor parts that would allow them to ramp up production to the desired level. So our client engagement team was able to connect with them and make them aware of what our supplies were. And we were able to support the designs of their products with our parts as well. And we ended up providing them with components such as microcontrollers, memory products, LED drivers, and power management devices. And because of this swift transformation, they were able to increase ventilator production at this facility from about 10 ventilators today to over 400.
Wow.
Yeah.
We did something similar in the United States with the Defense Production Act, right? Where we repurposed factories for these critical components.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was seen from kind of a lot of different manufacturing from a lot of different industries, because there was the example of GM and Ford Automotive, who took their facilities and transformed them from making car parts to making ventilators. Mm-hmm. That was a big one. And those two companies were also contracted with that Defense Act to boost the production. But on top of this, there was also some other responses that we saw from other industries, such as companies who would normally make beer, tequila, and they would stop making alcohol, start making hand sanitizer.
That's right.
And like other textile companies would be making PPE and face masks and things like that.
Yeah, I remember everybody had a thing of sanitizer on them. In fact, around the building, if you walk the Chandler campus, you can still see a lot of these sanitizer distribution stations where you can get some. So it was a big deal.
Absolutely.
So we had devices from existing customers, but we had the opportunity to work on new devices?
Yeah, so we were already supplying our products to a variety of different customers who produce medical devices, including the ones that ended up being essential to battling COVID. And the most important of these included ventilators and other respiratory support devices, but also pulse oximeters, medical imaging systems such as x-rays and ultrasounds, as well as drug delivery devices, thermometers, ECG monitors, And with the production troubles arising from supply chain issues, the FDA, through the CARES Act, was allowing these medical device companies to replace parts they were unable to procure with similar replacement parts as long as they provided the documentation showing that the performance wasn't affected. So because of this, we were able to assist these companies by selecting alternate parts that could be delivered along with the quality and technical specs to help the OEMs get authorization from the FDA for the swap. And through this, not only were we able to fill gaps in the devices we were already supporting, but we were also able to reach other device companies who were struggling to manufacture because of their own supply constraints. And because of the battle against COVID-19 required increased production of less common devices such as PCR virus testers, telemedicine equipment, and non-contact devices, our medical products group and field support team here at Microchip collaborated to become more familiar with these applications and to assist customers with these newer designs. So internally, we ran studies and conducted research to gain better understanding of how these devices worked and how our products could benefit them. So we tested our solutions and created reference and support materials to assist our customers with the changing designs. And because of this initiative, we were able to find success in supporting customers who are developing these technologies. And through emergency use authorizations granted by the FDA, these products were able to enter production in time to make a difference to help fight.
Right, because the standard FDA process is sometimes upwards of 18 months, right?
Yeah, and especially with critical care devices, it can easily go up to 18 months, sometimes even longer.
Because there's three classes of medical devices, right? According to the FDA?
That's correct.
How does that work?
So the FDA classifies class 1, 2, and 3 devices. Class 1 devices are pretty standard. They don't have a lot of opportunity to cause harm to a patient. And moving up to class 3 devices, those are like implants and things that small errors can have big problems.
Things that are inside the body, right?
Yeah, a lot of the time. And so most of the devices that we were working with through this time were class 2 devices. So ventilators and imaging systems, a lot of the time fall into that category.
And you were saying that this was a quick turnaround? Are we talking days, weeks?
Yeah, so because of the implementation of emergency use authorizations by the FDA, some of these products were able to have turnaround times as low as 3 to 10 days. And depending on what it was, there were certain situations, but essentially the CARES Act enabled the FDA to grant emergency use authorizations, and other regulatory agencies in different countries had similar protocols to create these pathways to speed up the products getting to the market. And so this allowed the companies to alter their devices or create new ones that could help battle this and get it out as fast as possible. And the FDA would authorize these products for use, which is different than a full approval from the FDA. An authorization simply says that while the emergency is ongoing, these devices can be sold. But once the end of that emergency comes along, they still need to go through the regular pathways to get approved.
Right. And at the time, there was a bit of a panic because we still didn't know much about what was going on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we were talking about it earlier, how quick it all unfolded. Within a few weeks, it went from not being much of a problem
to from nothing to everything.
Running
out
of
ventilators.
Exactly.
So this was a worldwide thing. Did suppliers have a lot of options besides Microchip?
So we were far from the only company to increase our support for medical customers. But as I kind of mentioned earlier, our broad product portfolios kind of allowed for us to have an accelerated response. And because all of our products at Microchip follow rigorous quality guidelines, we don't restrict our business with medical device companies the way a lot of other suppliers do. Mm-hmm. So when we were unable to supply a specific part that a customer needed, we were often able to find one of those equivalent parts to recommend, which could be delivered faster and minimize delays. So when we were able to assist the manufacturers with revising the design, and then we would provide that information, we'd provide the accompanying quality and any technical specs that they would need to go to the FDA to show them that this swap wouldn't affect the patient safety.
So So one of the things we pride ourselves on is client-driven obsolescence, where we really won't, if it's within our control, I should say, we won't cancel a product until people stop buying it. So we had product on the shelf. We had the capability to alter it with the software. I mean, there's really a lot of flexibility there that really served us well in helping people during probably one of the once-in-a-century health crises that affected the entire planet.
Yeah, exactly.
We had been working with these medical device companies before, and I presume we know what their regular annual requirement is. You know, based with a extreme demand shock like this, were they doubling their orders? Were they tripling their orders? I mean, how did their regular order compare to what then started happening during the pandemic once it became fully going?
Yeah, so once the pandemic started going and they did see that surge in demands, each of their orders were about what they would normally order throughout a calendar year.
For the entire year?
Yeah.
All at once?
Yeah, and that was, and we were getting those every couple weeks to...
Every couple weeks?
Yeah, every month about for those different medical clients.
And that was just to make sure that we had enough safety stock, or?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, and again, it was also just the huge influx of demand from the governments and other agencies where people were really just trying to grow the stockpile on these devices. And
ventilators specifically, yeah, I remember the news reports.
And so, yeah, a lot of the products that were manufactured through this process didn't even end up being used, is what it seemed like after the fact. But it was pretty cool to just see how the system could work together, taking in different parts from the government and different industries to all work together to really increase the production on a level that a lot of people
needed
didn't
to happen.
think.
Yeah,
exactly.
The right people got together and got it done. So some of these products sound fairly complicated, but my understanding is that some of the stuff is available at CVS and Walgreens. I mean, did we just take for granted that it would always be on the shelf?
Yeah, I mean, in a way. So these devices, some of them at least, can be available at places like CVS and Walgreens, but the ones you find there are generally different than the hospital level devices. So pharmacies carry what we call consumer devices, where clinical care settings usually have medical capital devices. And so respiratory support devices like ventilators and CPAPs are pretty complex, and they have specific control parameters. So depending on the patient, they often require either a healthcare professional to operate it or a prescription for home use that has to operate within specific boundaries. So while these devices were common before COVID, the capacity to handle the influx of serious COVID cases in hospitals just didn't exist. And it wasn't only ventilators and pulse oximeters that became hard to come by. Hospitals were running out of bed space to accommodate all of the COVID patients. And luckily, just the rapid action to address these problems that was taken was able to avoid a complete overrun of our medical infrastructure. So in the end, I think that maybe it was a little bit taken for granted that in the US, where we're used to having a pretty robust medical system, that we would always have access to these critical care devices. But, I think we were also able to prove that it was something that we could overcome. And another thing I wanted to note was that I think we sometimes just take for granted the complexity of these devices in general that are used to battle diseases like COVID. So PCR virus testers, for example, that allowed you to prove you were COVID-free and still catch your flight to visit your relatives. Before any of the at-home tests were authorized, these incredibly complex machines were used, and they work by extracting the RNA from a virus. They amplify this RNA and detect it through RNA-specific fluorescent dyes, and it just really puts into perspective the amount of innovation that has been done to protect ourselves from global health emergencies like COVID.
Well, save potentially, thousands of lives, maybe millions?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. And as we look back on COVID now, the numbers really show the scale of it all. As you mentioned at the beginning, there are over 700 million cases recorded at this point, and nearly 7 million deaths as well. And it impacted pretty much every human on the planet in one way or another.
Yeah, and it's still impacting some of them.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know of any data regarding the impact of these exact initiatives on supporting the production of life-saving devices, but it was certainly beneficial in reducing the strain of the limited supply that they were facing. And I think it's also important to mention that while Microchip spared any resources it could to try to help this battle, there are also many other companies and other industries that did the same thing. And on top of that, we wouldn't have gotten anywhere without the frontline workers like nurses and physicians who are really doing the hard work and risked everything.
For sure.
Yeah. And, the pandemic really emphasized the critical abilities of semiconductors and microchips and saving lives on an unprecedented scale. As the world raced to treat this unpredictable illness, these little powerful components became essential in the rapid production and the advancement of diagnostic tools, critical care equipment, vaccine research, and a whole bunch of other things. So I think it can be said for certain that semiconductors played a role in saving uncountable lives through the pandemic.
Yeah, while we're on the subject of that, what kind of devices apply to the applications we've been talking about today? We've got, let's see if I captured everything you're talking about here. We've got ventilators, we've got pulse oximeters, virus testers, blood pressure meters, thermometers, O2 concentrators. What types of microchip components would go into these devices?
So the key devices that we were providing for all of these kinds of products were mostly MCUs, motor control, memory products, analog front end, and power management products. And this is because our MCUs are highly capable, especially in medical systems, because of their expansive peripherals and their balance between performance and efficiency. So it allows the manufacturers to use these single devices for a variety of different applications. And when you're looking at a medical device, they have to balance input signals from sensors and use that to control other parts of the devices. So a strong analog front end is very necessary for that, as well as power management. A lot of these devices need to be mobile, can't always be plugged into a wall. So power management is an important area to consider when designing these devices.
And in a medical environment, you really can't tolerate any failure at all because these are people's lives on the line, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So everything has to be done with the correct functional safety and the right protocols in place.
So suppose one of our listeners has a use case for this technology. They're listening to what you're saying and they're thinking to themselves, I might have an application for that. Where would they go and how could they adopt it? Where would we send them?
So yeah, if you want to learn more about our medical solutions and design resources, you can check out more at microchip.com/medical, where we have a variety of applications to explore, including many of the critical care devices that we talked about in this episode that we helped supply for the pandemic.
And we'll make sure that we place links to those pages in our show notes if anybody wants to follow along. Do you have any predictions for the future of microchip technology and medical devices and how this technology could enhance the human experience, like the examples we talked about today? Where are we going with this technology in light of what we've learned?
Because Microchip has strong roots in the medical industry, we were able to monitor the market as it evolved through COVID and kind of prepare for how it would look on the other side. So we have several technologies that enable medical manufacturers to fit their devices to the needs of the market today. And some examples of this are wireless communications with 5G, Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi capabilities, our highly efficient power analog devices, and silicon carbide for increased power efficiency and battery life. We have advanced solutions for displays and user interfaces, as well as some of the more exciting stuff like machine learning with our powerful FPGAs for edge computing that processes the vast amounts of data that the medical system requires. So while our medical system is already highly advanced and good at saving lives, I think that these technologies can advance, and as innovation continues, one big thing I hope to see is access to healthcare increase, and bringing these life-saving capabilities to more of the world's people who need it.
Any final thoughts on this?
Yeah, so semiconductors and microchips have been integrated to almost everything we interact with in our lives.
Yeah.
They make our lives more convenient and comfortable, and a lot of the times we barely think twice about it. But I think that the pandemic also emphasized another ability, which is their power to save lives. Despite the hardships that were unavoidable through the pandemic, I think there's some comfort that can be had in seeing how far technology has advanced our ability to interact with biology and battle these unpredictable events like these. And that being said, COVID also exposed a lot of vulnerabilities in the technologies that build our medical systems. As we came out of COVID, telehealth and wireless capabilities boomed, but many of these systems were not designed with adequate security measures, and this allowed hackers to gain access to these networks and seize sensitive medical data or lock down entire hospital network systems.
Yeah, I've heard about the ransomware attacks.
Yeah, exactly. Just because of these vulnerable communication devices that were being mass manufactured. So in response to this, the FDA and other regulatory agencies have been releasing guidance documents for how to prevent these attacks, and hopefully with collaboration between medical device companies and suppliers like Microchip with robust security solutions, we can control these issues and keep our medical systems protected.
Medical security. Wonderful. Justin, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Dana.
Justin Wilson is a technical marketing engineer at Microchip Technology working out of the Medical Products Group. He joins us today from our global headquarters in Chandler, Arizona. Thank you for venturing beyond the microchip with us. Join us next time as we continue to explore empowering innovation to enhance the human experience.